The Treasure of Sombrio Cove. Account of the discovery of the Trinity Treasure in Ilhabela, Brazil, by Sebastian Melgaço Martel. This work is inspired by the most fascinating treasure story ever told. It draws from oral and written accounts whose truth and authenticity cannot be verified, and is therefore categorized as fiction. The narrative weaves together various stories, collected over more than 15 years of research, filling in the gaps with elements shaped by the author's artistic freedom. A version of this work, in Brazilian Portuguese, written by the same author, is available under the title O Tesouro do Sombrio. Help spread the word about this completely handcrafted work to support its continuation. Visit www.otesourodosombrio.com.br. This work is protected by copyright. All rights reserved. This book faithfully transcribes Tomás G. Albuquerque's personal diary and notes, complete with all its literary merits and demerits. Chapter 1. First Contact with the Sombrio Treasure. The Origin of the Treasure. The events I'm about to share with you unfolded in places far from those mentioned in this narrative, yet they bear such a striking resemblance to them that one might think them interchangeable. However, for the sake of coherence and to avoid confusion, let's imagine these occurrences took place right here, in the settings I've described in my recounting. This particular story took place on a charming island known as the Island of São Sebastião, situated within the municipality of Ilhabela, Brazil. It's worth noting that this island is quite close to my hometown of São José dos Campos, where I reside, merely a few hours' drive from Ilhabela. My father, Mr. Osvaldo, whom I'll sometimes refer to as Candido, due to his nickname, was a man deeply immersed in historical mysteries. For years, he meticulously researched the findings of earlier researchers about the famed Treasure of the Trinity. He was thoroughly convinced that this treasure was hidden within a cave in the Sombrio Cove, a small bay in the Ilhabela archipelago. From the information my father compiled, he deduced that the treasure was a legacy of an ancient and advanced civilization. This civilization, which had established connections with the Incas, left a significant part of its heritage with them. Known as the Evadamios, Evadamians, the emissaries of this advanced society were esteemed by the Incas, treated with a reverence akin to that accorded to sacred priests. My father frequently described this civilization as O Povo das Máquinas, the people of the machines, highlighting their remarkable technological prowess. The outcome of my father's dedicated research, which drew on extensive notes from earlier scholars, involved calculations based on ley line theory, and what he later described as Gestalt applied to mathematics, convinced him that the hidden treasure lay within a cave he designated Itanhia Quara. This cave's entrance, he hypothesized, was skillfully hidden within the Sombrio Cove area, corroborating the insights of the researchers before him. An ancient document titled O Diário de Arara Poçanongara reveals the story that the Ilhabela treasure was once possessed by a Jesuit priest named Gonçalo Antonio, who allegedly explored Itanhia Quara. Remarkably, he also reportedly made contact with the civilization known as Povo das Máquinas, people of the machines. This priest, who lived in Brazil in the late 16th century, was not just a man of faith, but also a mathematician fascinated by the mysteries of pre-Columbian civilizations. Legend has it that the treasure was passed to Father Gonçalo by another elderly priest, Father José Euclides. Father Euclides, in turn, had received it from the Incas during an expedition in Potosí, led by Aleixo Garcia. According to my father's account, upon acquiring the treasure, Father Gonçalo made the calculated decision to hide it in the cave, Itanhia Quara. But he didn't stop there. He left behind a series of markers, mainly stones engraved with enigmatic symbols, scattered across the island of Ilhabela. These markers were not random. They were deliberately placed using what is known as geometria mystica, mystical geometry, often abbreviated as GM by researchers like my father. Essentially, Father Gonçalo turned the entire Ilhabela into a vast treasure map. To find the entrance to the Itanhia Quara cave, It would be necessary to decipher this complex geometric puzzle, using the markers as vertices and connection points. I often wondered if my father's obsession with the treasure was merely an unconscious way to escape the harsh realities of life, a relief from the tension of everyday burdens. One thing was certain. He seemed to believe that the island truly harbored wonders far beyond its paradisiacal beaches and stunning vegetation. In the depths of the Itanhia Quarta cave, my father often spoke of geometria mystica with a sense of reverence. He believed that this ancient mathematical system contained knowledge that modern mathematicians had yet to uncover. Even the most advanced math textbooks mentioned nothing remotely similar. 70 years had already passed since the earlier researchers, who had died by the time I began exploring this mystery, first attempted to unravel the complexities of geometria mystica. The combined efforts of these individuals painted a picture of dedication and obsession. The meticulousness and attention to detail my father brought to his research were commendable. On numerous occasions, he believed he had located the treasure, only to find nothing there, a familiar outcome for the researchers before him, who had devoted decades of their lives to this quest. Despite always believing they had pinpointed the correct location, success eluded them. This pattern suggests an unrelenting search, possibly driven by pareidolia or apophenia, perceiving patterns where none exist or attributing meaning to random patterns. Nonetheless, after investing yet more countless hours into examining the work of his predecessors and conducting exhaustive calculations, my father felt certain that this time he had accurately determined the location of the Itanhia Quarta Cave's entrance. This conviction was as strong as it had been on all the previous occasions when he had been mistaken. However, life has a way of abruptly changing our paths. In 2016, my mother tragically died in a car accident. The weight of the loss was too much for my father to bear. His once obsessive quest for the Sombrio treasure seemed insignificant in the face of such overwhelming sadness. He stopped his research and, trying to escape the painful memories, moved to Sweden. He never set foot in Ilhabella again, never ventured to the site he believed to be the entrance to the treasure-filled cave. My interest in the treasure hunt. While visiting Ilhabella in 2017, deeply affected by the loss of my mother, I unexpectedly found myself drawn to the story of the treasure. The lure of a buried treasure began to consume my thoughts. Maybe it was the echo of my father's obsession, or perhaps a coping mechanism for the psychiatric challenges I was facing. I started to wonder if my new interest was the result of a morbid obsessive compulsion, a desperate attempt to escape the harsh reality of existence, or simply a genetic predisposition, an inherent curiosity passed down from my father. The line between the two possibilities became blurred, and I was unsure about my true motivations. One day, I mustered up the courage to call my estranged father. It had been a long time since we last spoke, following our last argument. Our conversation, though brief, was filled with stories of hidden treasures, maps, and the mysterious geometria mystica. By the end of our chat, he agreed to send me some of his research notes. A few days later, a package from him arrived in the mail. Among the papers he shared with me, one stood out with the most potential. It contained data from what he considered his best calculations yet, indicating the possible location of the Itanhia Quarta Cave entrance. Holding it in my hands, I felt a sense of purpose and connection, not just with the treasure, but also with my father and the legacy of the researchers who came before him. On the treasure trail. In July 2018, filled with a potent mix of anticipation and uncertainty, I found myself embarking on a journey toward a place that had consumed both my father's attention and, subsequently, my own. My destination was none other than the entrance to the Itanhia Quarta Cave, believed to be the hiding spot of the Sombrio treasure. This location was nestled in the Sacco do Sombrio region of Ilhabella. Clutching my father's detailed notes, I followed the Inde Ouba Castelhanos trail. My backpack was packed with essentials, including a flashlight and a metal detector. Given the unfamiliar terrain and potential dangers of navigating through Ilhabella's dense forests, I made the prudent decision to hire a local guide. Nay, an Ilhabella native, with deep-set eyes and weathered skin that spoke of years under the sun, came highly recommended by the locals. With his extensive knowledge of the island's trails and hidden spots, he seemed the perfect companion for this expedition. The initial part of our expedition took us along the India Ubacastel Hanus Trail. However, a little over a kilometer before reaching Praia Vermelha, Ney steered us off the beaten path. We headed southeast, straight into the heart of the dense forest, towards the coastal area of Sombrio Cove. As we left the trail behind, the challenges intensified. The forest was thick, and the canopy above blocked much of the sunlight and GPS signal. Birds and insects surrounded us in a cacophony, while biting midges feasted on our blood without mercy, making us feel both isolated and engulfed by nature. At the treasure location, for nearly 4 hours, Ney and I trekked through the rough terrain. The landscape was a mix of steep inclines, followed by sharp descents, making every step a test of will and endurance. But eventually, our persistence paid off when we arrived at the exact latitude and longitude my father had calculated. However, after inspecting the site, my heart sank. There was no sign of a cave entrance, no indication that this place held secrets. The dense vegetation and moss-covered rocks offered no hint of a hidden treasure nearby. The weight of disappointment sat heavy in my chest. All the hours of research, the miles traveled, and the hope invested seemed to have been for nothing. In a mix of despair and perhaps a touch of embarrassment, I decided to use the metal detector. I meticulously scanned the ground and rocks, hoping this modern technology could unveil what had remained hidden for centuries. Deep in the lush heart of the jungle, near the coastal area of Saco de Sombrio, with sweat trickling down my forehead and the distant hum of forest insects, I pressed on in my quest. I had strayed from the sandy stream where we were, to relieve myself. Right where I had urinated, I scanned the ground with the metal detector, and its rhythmical beep tone shifted to a quicker sequence. Intrigued, I began to clear away the loose soil and vegetation, only to uncover a buried stone box. As I unearthed it, I was particularly struck by how the box was sealed, preventing any moisture from getting inside. It seemed ancient, but was impressively well preserved. Opening this ancient-looking container, my heart raced. Inside, it was filled with a greenish powder. Within this mysterious substance was a package, seemingly made of leather. Carefully, I unwrapped the package to reveal a curious star-shaped object, made of a unique reddish metallic material and finely engraved with symbols I couldn't decipher. Ney, peering over my shoulder, with his usually stoic face showing signs of surprise, whispered, "It's a Chicana cross." His knowledge about the ancient treasure researchers of the Trinity was invaluable, validating the significance of our discovery. However, as I held the star in my hand, an overwhelming sensation enveloped me. My vision began to blur and was replaced by a myriad of swirling spiral-like images that evoked a strange sense of familiarity. They danced and twisted before my eyes, pulling me deeper into their realm. The more I tried to focus, the more that strange sense of familiarity began to emerge. Yet, the feeling soon intensified to a level that filled me with dread, and I averted my gaze in terror. Amidst this chaotic experience, a delicious aroma wafted through the air, seemingly originating from a bizarre machine covered in thick, blood-colored fur. In my delirious state, I felt they were wolf hairs. Below the machine, there was a metal star identical to the one I had found, precariously positioned as if it were about to fall. I felt a strong urge to stop it from falling, but I did nothing. It's hard to describe, but amidst the chaos, I heard a chilling chant. "We are afraid of ourselves. We are afraid of the—" But the rest was muffled. It seemed to have said, "Lu Pam Zara," or something like that. Suddenly, the pleasant aroma became nauseating. The intensity was too much. I began to salivate profusely and felt overwhelming nausea. Instinctively, I put distance between myself and the box containing the green powder. Carefully, I wrapped the chicana in the leather cloth, and as soon as it was stored away, my symptoms began to subside, and the hallucinations ceased. Nay also mentioned feeling unwell, but not to the extent I had experienced. A profound change had occurred in me, and its effects lasted for days. Although we hadn't found the entrance to the Itinha Quara cave, what we had discovered was incredible in its own right. With the mysterious treasure safely in my backpack, and after taking precautions to cover our nose and mouth from the green dust, we decided to set up camp for the night. We pitched our tent beside a crystal-clear stream, its gentle flow providing a lullaby against the nighttime chorus of the forest. That night, however, sleep eluded me. My mind was restless, still processing the bizarre hallucinatory experience and dealing with the anxiety it had induced. At dawn, Nay and I, despite feeling the weight of the previous day, decided to start our journey back to Bonnet. Every step I took became a struggle, as I fought against persistent anxiety and was haunted by the echoes of that inexplicable incident in the forest. Chapter 2. On the way home, a new trail companion. Around 11 a.m., we were already on the trail near Indioba. As we walked, a feeling of discomfort began to emerge in me. Memories of that hallucination came back to mind, especially the image of the machine with thick red wolf fur. The music echoed repeatedly in my head. We are afraid of ourselves. We are afraid of Lupam Zara. I couldn't shake off that thought. I wished I had remembered to bring my anxiety medication. Gradually, the soft, distant sound of the sea filled the air, and soon we found ourselves on the sands of Indioba Beach. We decided to take a break, a moment to rest and re-energize before continuing to the village of Bonnet. However, as we began to leave the beach and enter the trail, a figure caught my attention. A girl with red hair, carrying a backpack, seemed to be heading in the same direction as us, presumably towards Bonnet. Her friendly demeanor was evident as she approached, and with a strong foreign accent coloring her Portuguese, she asked, "Where are you guys coming from?" "We're coming from Castelhanos," I lied, not wanting to reveal anything about our purpose there or discovery. She seemed surprised. "But I've been camping there since yesterday and didn't see you guys around," she said, laughing. Then, pointing at the metal detector sticking out of my backpack, she commented, "I thought you were looking for some treasure or something." Feeling a bit cornered and not wanting to go into details, I looked for an excuse. "Actually, we only went from Bonete to Praia Mansa, which is before Castelhanos, and now we're heading back to Ilhabela. We're catching a boat from Bonete," I explained. She smiled, clearly intrigued, and responded, "How strange! You made it all the way to Praia Mansa and skipped the beautiful Castelhanos beach nearby, opting to trek all the way back to Bonete? Most hikers typically make their way to Ilhabela from Castelhanos or take a jeep." I nodded, feeling a bit embarrassed. However, she didn't press the issue, and the conversation took another turn. We introduced ourselves. She said her name was Veronica. Her voice carried a joyful tone that was infectious. "Can I join you on the way to Bonete?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Of course," Nay replied, before I could say anything. Quickly and discreetly, I signaled Nay, asking him to be mindful of our conversations and to make sure he didn't mention our purpose or discovery. As we continued on, I was pleasantly surprised by the growing connection I felt with Veronica. My diary entry from that day reflected this sentiment as I jokingly noted, "I liked her scent. I'd grown fond of her. It's rare for me to form an affinity with someone so swiftly, given my usual struggles with social interactions." A parapsychology researcher. Veronica openly shared about her background as a parapsychology researcher. She spoke enthusiastically about her wealthy father, who sponsored her investigations, and how she had developed a deep affinity for Ilhabela and its mysticism. This revelation piqued my interest, and I found myself genuinely intrigued. Parapsychology was not a field I often encountered. I shared with her that I was in my third year of psychology at university and had an interest in hypnosis. At this point, we realized we had much in common. The temptation to tell her about our discovery, the peculiar metallic star, was strong, but I resisted. I wasn't ready to unveil that part of my journey yet. The trek to Bonnet took almost 4 hours. We made occasional stops, drinking chlorinated water, eating dried meat, and cereal bars to recharge our energies. What surprised me the most was how naturally our conversation flowed, filling the spaces of our journey. I rarely find myself in such lengthy and engaging conversations. Veronica's command of Portuguese was remarkable. Despite her strong foreign accent, she managed to use local slang effortlessly. It seemed as though she had spent years living here. The ease with which our conversation flowed, and the profound interest Veronica showed in our dialogue, began to raise a subtle alarm in my mind. It was very unusual for me. I generally struggle with casual conversations, and most people seem to have little interest in interacting with me. The change, while pleasant, left me a bit suspicious. It seemed too good to be true. As we made our way through the lush trail, Veronica mentioned her 5-year-old daughter. "I'm a single mother," she added, her voice tinged with vulnerability. I found myself wondering, perhaps with a hint of hope, if Veronica might have any romantic interest in me. But almost immediately, my tendency to doubt myself kicked in. She was so pleasant and smart. Surely she must have someone in her life. I thought about asking her directly if she was seeing someone, but quickly dismissed the idea. Such boldness was not within my comfort zone. In an attempt to share something personal, as she had, I mentioned my occasional bouts of anxiety, especially following my mother's passing. I could sense Veronica's empathetic nature wanting to delve deeper into my pain and the circumstances of my mother's departure. However, I avoided the topic, uncomfortable with the raw emotions it stirred. Recognizing my reluctance, she respected my boundaries and chose not to press further. It was a silent acknowledgement between two people on a trail, each carrying their own baggage, both literal and emotional. We continued our walk, the sound of our steps in sync with the flow of our conversation, leaving some topics behind and moving forward with others. I noted in my diary later that day that this girl had caught my attention. "Un atelier in Bonete." As we neared Bonete, Veronica's voice filled with enthusiasm as she revealed she was an artist. "I paint," she declared, her eyes shining with passion. Curious, Nay and I accepted her invitation to view her works at the inn where she claimed to be staying. The inn, or what I assumed to be an inn, was a haven of artistic expression. Dozens of paintings adorned the walls, the sheer number making it clear this was not merely a room rented for the night. This place was frequented by Veronica, perhaps even a sanctuary for her. The artworks ranged from intricate mandalas to abstract images, all rendered in a psychedelic style that was undeniably captivating. I felt a mix of admiration and slight envy. How I wished for such talent. She led us through her gallery, pausing to unveil the mysteries behind each painting. Of particular interest were the paintings depicting knots, both tied and untied, each with its own complexity. "They represent the structure of consciousness," she explained, her voice mirroring the depth of her creations. One of the paintings, in a spiral shape, made me halt. A strange sense of déjà vu enveloped me. It wasn't the painting itself, but the emotions it stirred within me. It reminded me of the moment I found the chacana. Intrigued by this unexpected connection, I took a photo of the painting and quickly noted my feelings in my diary on my phone. However, as the minutes passed, this initial curiosity turned into an overwhelming sense of discomfort. The environment, the art, Veronica's intense gaze, everything seemed to close in around me. Memories of my last panic attack, which had led to a long period of psychiatric treatment, resurfaced. I felt vulnerable, with my brain struggling to maintain its fragile balance. I hoped the day would not end on a sour note. After taking a moment to breathe and drinking some lemonade, the buzzing in my ear subsided, and I felt an improvement in my emotional state. Ulterior motives? As Veronica continued to share more about her life and deep passions, part of me felt an increasing desire to match her honesty. My hand instinctively reached for the pocket in my backpack, where the wrapped metallic star was safely stored. The thought of showing it to her crossed my mind several times. Could sharing our discovery with her further strengthen the budding relationship between us? Or was I merely being overly optimistic, reading too much into our casual encounter? However, a lingering doubt held me back. There was something in Veronica's demeanor, a depth in her eyes, that made me pause. It wasn't suspicion per se, but a blend of curiosity and confusion. After all, it wasn't every day that someone like her, sophisticated, knowledgeable, and evidently successful, initiated a conversation with someone like me. The skeptical side of me wondered if she had ulterior motives. Was she genuinely interested in a deeper connection? Or was the parapsychologist in search of something entirely different? Given my past and the emotions I carried, I couldn't afford to face a setback. I was too vulnerable, too exposed. Deciding not to act impulsively, I chose not to reveal the chicana. Goodbye, Veronica. Our time at the inn passed more quickly than I had anticipated. As we prepared to say goodbye, I decided to follow the Brazilian custom of parting with a kiss on the cheek. But true to my awkward nature, the gesture was anything but smooth. Our faces collided in an awkward mismatch, and a flush of embarrassment overwhelmed me. Attempts to rectify it only made things worse. I murmured an apology, hoping to move past the moment. The day had been eventful, and this certainly wasn't how I envisioned it ending. But such is life, filled with unexpected twists and turns. The weight of the moment bore down on me as the possibility of exchanging phone numbers hung in the silence. Part of me longed to ask for hers, to ensure this wouldn't be the last time our paths crossed. However, my insecurities and anxieties, ever so present, whispered doubts in my ears, holding me back from moving forward. Nay, usually the more decisive of us, also held back. I wasn't sure if it was out of respect for my hesitations or his own reasons. The hope that she might initiate the exchange, perhaps noticing my reluctance, also faded. She made no move to offer her number or ask for mine. The realization hit me like a cold wave. Perhaps she wasn't as invested in this new connection as I had hoped. Maybe our meeting, the deep conversations, and the shared moments were just fleeting episodes in her adventurous life. The possibility of being just another passerby in her world hurt, but I tried to brace myself against the pain. After all, life had taught me to temper my expectations and not let ephemeral moments dictate my worth. Goodbye, Nay. Nay and I continued our journey, heading to Bonete Beach with the aim of hiring a motorized canoe. We hoped this would take us to Borifos, or perhaps closer to the center of Ilhabela. As we walked, the day's events replayed in my mind, and I grew increasingly curious about the peculiar metal star, or chacana, as Nay had called it. We should plan another trip, Nay suggested, as we navigated the winding paths of Bonete. Maybe we'll find the entrance to that cave. I nodded in agreement. I'm eager to learn more about this chacana. I'll keep you updated, share any discoveries I make about it. Nay's eyes lit up. You know, legend has it that the Treasure of Sombrio Cove included an object exactly like this one. Researchers have been looking for it for decades. They called it chacana, or Inca cross, and believed it was made of a rare metal, orichalcum. I looked at Nay, surprised by his knowledge. Reflecting, I recalled having a brief moment of doubt about why Nay referred to the object as a cross, when, to me, it clearly looked more like a star. However, I didn't mention this to Nay. The more we talked about our discovery, the more I felt a protective instinct over the artifact. Nay? I started cautiously. We probably should report our discovery to the authorities, but I'd prefer not to hand it over immediately. Do you think we can keep this just between us for now? Nay hesitated before responding. I'm evangelical, Tomas. I value honesty, but I promise I won't say a word about this. I understand the importance of what we've found. Nay recognized it was only fair that the chacana remain with the researchers who have been seeking this treasure for 70 years. Chapter 3. The chacana, back to my normal. Upon returning to San Jose dos Campos, the familiarity of my hometown enveloped me, offering temporary relief to my frayed nerves. However, my brief adventure in Ilhabela left its marks, particularly on my mind. The effects of the chacana, and that star-shaped object I discovered, had not lessened, and its unsettling influence seemed ever present. With each passing day, the turmoil within my mind grew sharper. Sleep eluded me, and when it finally arrived, it was infested with vivid and disturbing dreams. Seeing the clear signs of my mental state deteriorating, I found myself once again in the psychiatrist's office. There, the doctor prescribed the same antidepressants I naively hoped to avoid needing again so soon. Far from the urban landscape of São José dos Campos, I often sought refuge in Sombrio, a piece of countryside land I owned, a place my mother loved to visit, located near the Serra do Mar, accessible by the same road that leads down to the beach. I must mention that, a few months before my trip to Ilhabela, I arrived there late at night, everything completely dark. As I walked from one cabin to another, I heard a strange noise. Turning on my cell phone's flashlight, I found myself face to face with a huge rattlesnake, cascabel. It was an incredible sight. I was feeling so down that day that I found myself asking the snake, "Why didn't you bite me and end it all?" I couldn't help but think that perhaps it was so annoyed it thought leaving me alive would be punishment enough. Fear of green dust, Sombrio was my sanctuary, a place where the noise of the world faded away, replaced by the harmonious sounds of nature. There, two rustic cabins stood as reminders of a simpler time. It was in one of these cabins that I left my backpack, with the chacana safely stored inside, untouched for days. Days turned into weeks, but the moment arrived. With determination, I decided it was time to face the object that had turned my life upside down. Entering the cabin, my hand hesitated for a moment before grabbing the backpack. Heart racing, I prepared to confront the chacana and the mysteries it held once again. I couldn't shake the idea that the psychotic episode I experienced when handling the chacana for the first time was triggered by the strange green powder covering it. Determined to understand the true nature of the chacana and the role of the green powder, I took some precautions. I rummaged through my belongings and picked up a basic respiratory protection mask. I put it on to protect myself from possibly inhaling any remnants of the green powder. The memories of my previous episode served as a stark reminder of what I hoped to avoid. I was resolved not to let it happen again. With the backpack in hand, I ventured into the forest, away from the cabin, to deal with the chacana. Holding the package at a distance, I began to carefully clean the remaining green dust that had settled on the outside of the wrapping. I thought the open air would be ideal, letting the wind carry away the dust. As I meticulously wiped away each trace, I was relieved to find I wasn't experiencing any unusual psychiatric effects. I breathed a sigh of relief. The outermost part of the wrapping now seemed completely free of any traces of green dust. Taking a deep breath and still wearing the mask, I started to unwrap the chacana. Slowly unrolling the fabric and cleaning it as I went, I finally laid eyes on the chacana. At that very moment, an intense terror overwhelmed me. Another psychotic attack was beginning. Reflexively, I quickly wrapped the chacana back in its leather fabric. As if a switch had been flipped, the moment it was out of my sight, the overwhelming sensations ceased immediately. Eye contact. I remained in the forest, gasping, realizing that it wasn't the green powder after all. The chacana itself was the trigger. Back at the cabin, I carefully placed the wrapped chacana on a wooden table. I removed my mask and allowed myself a moment of relief, taking deep breaths. Driven by curiosity, I leaned in for a cautious sniff of the package. No psychedelic or psychological effect hit me. The environment remained stable, my mind clear. Gaining a bit of confidence from this, and believing I had found a way to halt the harmful psychological effects simply by rewrapping the chacana, I dared to unveil the object once more. Almost immediately, as soon as my eyes met the metallic surface, my thoughts began to spiral out of control. I felt my connection to reality weaken, as if trying to hold water with my fingers. Without hesitation, I covered the chacana again with the fabric, and the disorienting effects disappeared instantly. Breathing heavily, I leaned against the cabin wall. This confirmed my growing suspicion. It wasn't the green powder. The chacana itself held a mysterious power, influencing my mind in a way I couldn't understand. Another suspicion. The strange fabric, with its leather-like appearance, was the only barrier between me and the mental onslaught triggered by the object. Whether it was genuine leather or some other material, it uniquely shielded me from the enigmatic effects of the Shekinah. As I prepared to head back to the city, I began to contemplate my next steps. Suddenly, a terrifying thought froze me. What if the Shekinah was radioactive? The idea of exposing myself, and worse, exposing others, to dangerous radiation unknowingly filled me with dread. Perhaps the fabric protecting me from the object's effects was lined with lead, similar to the protective apron used in radiology departments. But almost as quickly as the fear arrived, my rational side took over. I had heard about radiation sickness, but it never manifested as immediate mind-altering effects. Could a radioactive metallic object really disturb my mind in the blink of an eye like that? Yes, eye contact. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, I decided to conduct another experiment. If the Shekinah was indeed radioactive, another brief and indirect exposure probably wouldn't alter my fate much. Taking a deep breath, I carefully unwrapped the object, avoiding direct eye contact with it. Seconds passed, and to my surprise, nothing happened. My mind remained clear, my thoughts organized. The realization was astonishing. Only direct visual contact with the Shekinah triggered its disturbing effects. The leather fabric cover made no difference whatsoever. The word orichalcum echoed in my mind, as Nay had mentioned it once. This ancient metal, believed by some to possess unique properties, was mentioned in legends and sought after by treasure hunters. Could I be in possession of something truly magical? Despite the mounting evidence, a part of me resisted the mystical explanations. Perhaps all of this was a figment of my imagination, a manifestation of my unstable psyche. The boundaries between reality and my own illusions seemed blurrier than ever, and I struggled to grasp what was happening. Was the Shekinah truly enchanted, or was I descending further into my own disturbed mind? Only time would tell. I decided to take precautions with the Shekinah. The oddity of the object and the suspicion that it might be radioactive or dangerous demanded caution. For safety, I chose to hide it, far from the eyes of anyone who might accidentally find it. At the ranch, there was a hole that used to be a cesspit. It seemed like a good place to conceal the Shekinah. With some effort, I placed it there, ensuring it was well hidden. Mr. Candido needed to know. A few days later, I decided to tell my father about the discovery. I hadn't even told him about my trip to Ilabella. Our relationship was strained, especially after my mother's death. I managed to contact him via video call. The first thing he asked me, as soon as he answered the call, was whether I had gone to Ilabella to try to find the entrance to the cave. I started the conversation by asking, out of sheer curiosity, how he had come up with those treasure coordinates. Smiling and sensing that I had found something, he asked if I had been there, if I had found anything. But as I insisted on knowing how he had come up with those coordinates, he mentioned that it had not been easy. He had used a technique he called Gestalt applied to mathematics, admitting it wasn't his invention, but that of previous researchers. He had merely developed the idea further. I explained that there was no sign of a cave entrance at the location or in the surrounding area. With a moment of hesitation and taking a deep breath, I told him about the Shekinah, mentioning that I found it near the spot he had indicated as the entrance to Itan Hianquara. He immediately showed interest. "Show it to me," he demanded. "Unfortunately," I replied, "I can't right now. Looking at it makes me feel unwell, dizzy, as if I had taken some potent hallucinogen," I explained, trying to avoid mentioning the more psychiatric effects. I always strive to keep my father on the margins of my psychiatric struggles. Perhaps it was a way to protect myself from his judgments and to avoid further tension between us. I hid it in a hole at the Jambero Ranch, I continued, avoiding his gaze. I'm also concerned it might be radioactive or something of the sort. There was a pause before he responded. All right, he said, his voice softer than usual. I'll send you a Geiger counter. You can use it to check if the object emits radiation. I nodded, grateful for the unexpected offer of help. The chacana is a key. My father, breaking the ice that often characterized our conversations, began to share intriguing details. The shape of the Inca cross, or chacana, that you found, is central to the theory of geometria mystica, he said, with a hint of enthusiasm in his voice, something rare for him. There were rumors about a similar discovery in Saco de Sombrio. It's described as a reddish metallic object in the shape of this Inca cross, believed to be made of orichalcum. According to reports, it is a type of metal shrouded in myths for its supposed extraordinary properties. A chill ran down my spine. This was aligning too closely with what I had experienced. He continued, This chacana, Tomas, might be a sort of key, a key to the entrance of the Itinhuayquara cave. I blinked, trying to digest his words. What makes you think that? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He leaned closer to the camera and said, As soon as you confirm it doesn't emit harmful radiation, I'd like to see it. And about the cave, if my theory is right, its entrance should be near where you found the chacana. Analyzing the object could give us more clues about the exact location. A mix of fear and curiosity settled in me. It was clear this was not just any artifact, and even though I wanted to distance myself from it, I felt irrevocably tied to its mystery. Others also look for the Sombrio treasure. My father shared some warnings. With a tone laden with urgency, he cautioned me, Tomas, you need to be careful. There are wealthy people from abroad who have been after the Sombrio treasure for decades. Back when I lived in San Jose dos Campos, they tried to pull me into their group, but I never agreed. It wasn't just any group. They oozed arrogance and an extreme fanaticism rooted in occultism. I have reasons to believe they were behind the break-in at our house, where they stole some of my notes on Geometria Mystica. I hesitated, but ended up telling him about my encounter with Veronica. On the way back to Bonnet, we encountered a foreign young lady named Veronica. She said she researches parapsychology and talked about her well-off father. She shared her fascination with the mystique of Iliabela. She showed us her painting studio she set up in an inn in Bonnet. But I didn't find her arrogant, I said, hoping that might distance her from the group my father mentioned. My father exclaimed, A parapsychologist? Then asked, Did you show her the chacana or talk about the discovery? I answered that I hadn't shown or told her, but she noticed I was carrying a metal detector. His expression turned more serious. I'd bet anything she's involved with those fanatic treasure hunters. Probably she is one of them, he countered sharply. They have huge mansions all over Iliabela, properties in Indayauba, and other secluded areas in the island's forests. They are completely obsessed with the Sombrio treasure. My heart raced as I admitted another mistake. Candido, I left traces, I confessed, feeling the weight of my recklessness. The stone box where I found the chacana was too heavy to carry in the backpack. I left it there, exposed, unearthed. My father's face lost color, and I could feel his concern. They're going to track you down, Thomas, he said seriously. These fanatics think they're above common morality. They are the eccentric wealthy type, with too much money and time, and an inflated ego, believing they are the only enlightened ones chosen to govern the world. Chapter 4. Confrontation with Reality. Measuring Radiation. A few days after my conversation with Candido, I was surprised to find not one, but two packages waiting for me. Upon opening them, I discovered two different Geiger counters. Candido, always so meticulous, had decided to send two different models to ensure the accuracy of the radiation readings for the Shakana. I called him, and he quickly explained the basics of how to use each device. The operation was quite straightforward. I took both devices to Jambero, my heart racing as I approached the Shakani's hiding spot. I started by measuring the package itself, but the devices indicated a total absence of radiation. Deciding to be even more thorough, I unwrapped the Chakana and started the testing process again. After several attempts, both devices confirmed the same thing: no radiation. This was a relief. Understanding how to control its effects, I felt a new confidence in handling the Chakana, as long as I didn't look directly at it. I began to realize that the metal, or calcum, could be the cause behind the psychological effects I experienced. Was it just me? Or would others be affected too? Perhaps my predisposition to depressive episodes made me more susceptible. Encouraged by the discovery, I did something I hadn't imagined doing days before. I fitted the Shakana onto a chain and hung it around my neck under my shirt. It was no larger than 4 centimeters wide. I didn't expect that. Shortly after checking the radioactivity of the Chakana, I quickly called my father for a video call. A wave of enthusiasm swept over me as I showed the Shakana to the camera, but my heart nearly stopped when I saw the expression of pure confusion on his face. "I can't see anything, Tomas," he said, adjusting his glasses and frowning with concern. I tried different angles, rotating the Shakana from side to side, desperate for him to see. But it was in vain. Every time he repeated those 4 words, it felt like a stab in my chest. "I can't see anything." The expression on my father's face was a mix of concern and disbelief. It was clear he regretted investing in the Geiger counters, but more than that, there was an unmistakable shadow of fear for my mental health. This fear chilled me. He seemed to be thinking that perhaps it was time to take me back with him, to care for me directly. "Tomas," he began, his voice gentle yet firm, "I think it would be good for you to see a doctor." Despair. A feeling of profound despair invaded my heart. I began to think that my father was right. I needed a doctor because I was losing my sanity. Sitting alone under the dim light of my room, the silence was broken only by the sporadic barking of a distant dog. My mind was racing, overwhelmed by confusion and fear. Then, like a light cutting through the darkness, I remembered Nay. He had seen the object too, hadn't he? But he called it a cross, not a star. My heart tightened at the emergence of a new possibility. What if Nay had seen something completely different? The more I pondered, the more a disturbing idea took hold. Had I, in some delirious state, convinced Nay that he saw something? Perhaps through some involuntary process akin to hypnosis, I had implanted the existence of the Shekinah in his mind. The idea that I could have unconsciously influenced Nay in such a way deepened my despair. As the walls of my room seemed to close in on me, a deep feeling of hopelessness enveloped me. I had never felt so desolate, not even on the day my mother passed away. How could I face a future with so little certainty of reality? The idea of living the rest of my life with the ghost of a schizophrenia diagnosis was unbearable. Tears ran down my face, and I openly wept, consumed by a feeling of complete loneliness. I had no one to turn to. I couldn't even rely on myself. Since my mother's death, I had been adrift, and now it seemed I was truly alone, lost in a sea of my own confused thoughts and fears. Yet another hallucination. Still with tears streaming down my face, I felt the weight of the Shekinah against my chest, cold and indifferent. In a moment of despair, I grasped it, pulling it out from under my shirt. I stared at it intently, caring little for the new psychotic outbreaks it would likely provoke in me. My voice choked. "You're my madness, aren't you?" The cold and intricate design seemed to mock me. "You're the materialization of my insanity, aren't you?" Suddenly, my surroundings changed. Another vivid hallucination unfolded before me. In front of me were 8 small, swirling spiral symbols, each slightly different from the others, and behind them was a container made of the purest and most transparent glass. Inside it was a type of cloud, a substance that defied any description. It looked like a gas, yet was a consistent gas, similar to foam. This nebulous matter, which was inside the transparent container, was comprised of layers upon layers, each meticulously folded over the other, reminiscent of the layers of an onion. The vision was strangely mesmerizing. That same feeling of familiarity I had experienced when I first found the chakana came over me again, but this time its intensity was even more overwhelming. I felt as though I was looking into the depths of my own soul. As I continued to contemplate this peculiar vision, an intriguing understanding emerged within me. This intricate, layered structure was a representation of my own psyche. The recognition was so profound that I could no longer bear to look at the image, fearing what the culmination of this awareness might bring. Now, daring to stare directly at the chakana, I felt a little less fear of it, getting the impression that its effects could be controlled. A deep calm settled over me. The revelation had been clear. I was not insane. Yes, I was emotionally and mentally wounded, but I was not a victim of schizophrenia. This strange vision, provoked by the cocaine, had provided significant comfort. However, despite this solace, I still felt insecure, wondering, how was it possible that my father couldn't see the chakane? One more witness. The hours dragged on as I waited to speak with Nay. The weight of my insecurity became unbearable. Each passing minute felt like an eternity. But finally, the familiar ring of the cell phone broke the oppressive silence, signaling the start of our video call. Anxiously, I showed the chakana to the camera. "Do you see this, Nay?" I asked, my voice trembling with anticipation. Nay took a moment, examining the object before nodding. "Yes, Tomas. I see it. It's exactly as we found it in Sombrio." I was incredulous. "But why did you call it a cross? It's clearly a star," I insisted, needing all the certainty I could get. Nay let out a soft laugh. "You know, I always imagined the treasure would be in the shape of a chakana. Turns out it doesn't look like a chakana at all. Just a slip-up, nothing more." But I couldn't let it go. The previous incident with my father still fresh in my mind. My words tumbled out, revealing my anxiety. "Are you sure you're seeing it, Nay? Right now, as I'm showing it?" Nay's face softened with concern, recognizing my distressed state. "Tomas, calm down. I saw the object the moment we unwrapped it from the fabric in the stone box, and I see it now. If you're seeing things that don't exist, then we're both in the same situation, because to me it's as clear as day." His words, filled with sincerity, fell on me like a balm. The overwhelming feelings of isolation and doubt began to recede. Nay's simple affirmation was the support I desperately needed. I feared that the immense stress of the day would weigh heavily on me. With my psychiatric condition, such intense experiences often exacerbated my depressive episodes. As is typical with my mental struggles, one worry piled onto another. However, surprisingly, I felt well, which was unusual for me. That night, I found solace in sleep, resting deeply and peacefully, a sensation I had not experienced in years. The next morning, still sleepy, I picked up my cell phone and saw a notification. Nay had sent a video. Eagerly, I clicked to watch it. Nay's voice sounded reassuring, confirming that he saw the object both when we discovered it and during our video call. A feeling of validation washed over me, and without a second thought, I forwarded the video to my father. Shortly after, my phone buzzed with his response. We needed to try another video call. He speculated that there might have been some technical issue last time. Throughout the day, I reviewed Nay's video testimony several times. Each viewing acted as a subtle reaffirmation, gradually dispelling the doubts lingering in my mind. Something really intriguing. My cell phone buzzed with a new message from my father. He wanted a short video of the chakane. I took a deep breath to calm myself and recorded the object, sending the video shortly thereafter. It wasn't long before I received a reply from him confirming that he had indeed seen the chacana in the video. I let out a sigh of relief. Perhaps it had just been a technical error during our previous call. Later, when I connected with my father on the video call we had planned, something very strange happened. I showed the chacana to the camera, but he still couldn't see it, just like the first time. Determined, we tried using different video call apps, but to no avail. Every time, from his perspective, it was as if the chacana disappeared from the video when I showed it in real time. The stress and confusion from the day before were not in vain. This was truly intriguing. The weight of the bizarre situation began to bear down on me. While the feelings of psychological insecurity had been momentarily alleviated, they were now replaced by a thick cloud of perplexity. I kept reviewing the events in my mind, obsessively trying to understand the situation, looking for any possible flaw. Nay had seen the chacana on the video call, but my father had not. How could something like this happen? What was so special about this object? My cell phone kept vibrating with messages from my father, each filled with theories and attempts to understand the phenomenon. The messages turned into a frenetic exchange of our astonishment and hypotheses. Both of us were desperate to find a rational explanation for the mysterious event. My father asked me to send him Nay's full name, which I did. After that, my father stopped sending messages, and, in the hustle and bustle of daily life, we stopped talking. Given my background as a psychology student, I couldn't help but wonder if there was some kind of hypnotic influence at play. I had taken courses in hypnosis and was familiar with how it worked, but this was different. The chacana was visible in photos and recordings, but somehow became invisible on real-time video calls, at least to my father. The thought consumed me. What kind of hypnosis or mental suggestion could achieve such a feat? An idea began to form in my mind. I needed to conduct more experiments with the chacana. I could involve my college peers. They would be impartial participants, and perhaps could shed some light on this enigma. I had to figure it out. The Treasure of Sombrio Cove. Account of the discovery of the Trinity treasure in Ilha Bela, Brazil. Audiobook. Purchase the paperback edition of the book on Amazon and become a patron of this project. Access the link in the description of the video. Subscribe to this channel to access more exclusive content.